Unit 6, not a huge unit, only 7 to 9% of the AP exam, meaning we would expect there to be 7 to 9 multiple choice questions about this stuff. There's 9 standards that the College Board asked us to cover. We're going to go through them on 3 slides. Okay, so follow along with your notebooks. Unit 6, we started off, I believe, this is Unit 6, Day 1, talking about how babies develop. Yes, prenatal development. So the idea that like from conception to birth, we call this period gestation. So for humans, the female gestational period, meaning how long a woman is pregnant, how long it takes the baby to incubate, to cook. Gestation, 9 months. Okay. We start off by calling it zygote. That is wrong. We start off by calling it zygote for the first couple of weeks, and then we call it embryo for the first couple of months, and then we refer to it as fetus. ZEF, zygote, embryo, fetus. Okay. We talked about during this stage these harmful chemicals, teratogens, kind of like carcinogens. Teratogens are these potentially damaging things. It could be a virus, it could be a drug, it could be a substance, a caffeine. But it's really important that a pregnant mom is eating good foods, fatty foods, omega-3s, fatty acids, fish oils. Those are some of the things that can really help baby's brain development go well. If mom gets sick, it means baby's being exposed to sickness. If mom is using drugs, it means baby's being exposed to drugs. We talked about fetal alcohol syndrome and the fact that babies can be born with addiction because they're connected to mom through umbilical cord, through placenta, through that filter that's supposed to be filtering things out. It can't filter everything out. So mom's got to take care of herself. Okay. Once baby is born, baby goes through maturation or maturation, same word. It's when the baby sort of shows signs of motor development. So baby will like be able to hold its head up on its own, and then baby will be able to like roll over, and baby will be able to sit, and they will be able to crawl, and they will be able to stand and then walk and then run. And all babies kind of go through maturation in the same order as their brain develops, their motor cortex and that frontal lobe. That was a review from last week, Tuesday, Unit 2. Also, while I'm talking about it, those of you who are watching this, or those of you who missed Thursday's class, Evan, Zach, Brianna, Courtney, etc. If you didn't watch the Unit 2 video that I posted for your digital learning day, you got to go back and watch that too, because that's when I covered Units 2 and 3. It's another like hour-long video, and I found out yesterday like no one watched it. Really bad. Go watch it. Y'all need to be studying for the AP exam. Y'all had work to do on Tuesday. Do your work. We talked about the brain and the frontal lobe and the cortices in that video that I posted for Tuesday. Number 3 here, temperament. Baby's attitude towards the world, how emotional they are. That's a stable part of their personality that'll probably last over the course of their lives. If the baby has an easy temper, they'll probably be an easygoing teenager and adult. If they have an anxious, frustrated temper, they'll probably be like that as they get older as well. So temperament is long-lasting and stable. Number 4, where does this come from? Well, this has been throughout all of AP Psych. It's a combination of your nature, your genetics, what you inherit from your biological folks. It's that combined with your nurture, your upbringing, the environment you live in, the experiences you've had. Okay. If we take identical twins who have the exact same DNA, they won't end up being the exact same person, because psychology is not all nature. A lot of it is based on the experiences you've had, your kindergarten teacher, okay, or which sports team you were on in 4th grade, or which instrument you chose to play in middle school. Those things shape you, and that's why you can still have different personalities, even if you share a lot of the same genetics, even if you share the same household. You're gonna have a lot of things in similar, but you'll still be a little bit different because nurture does matter. Any questions about 1 through 4 here as you're looking through your notebooks? Any topics or phrases that you're like, you didn't mention this, can you go over it real quick? Questions from Zoomers or in-person folks about just like general early development? All right, so let's start getting into some of the theories. The biggest theory they like to ask about is the theory of cognitive development. This is Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Cognitive, this is what we went over in class yesterday. Cognition, our thinking, our memory, our language. Piaget said there are 4 stages. I use the mnemonic smart preschoolers cook fish. SPCF. Those are the 4 stages. In the first year of life, you're in the sensory motor stage, which is when you only think about the world based on what you can touch and what you can put in your mouth. I showed you all a video of a stupid baby who the mom was playing peekaboo with him, And he was having a lot of trouble because he was still developing object permanence and understanding that even when you can't see it, it's still there. But every time he did touch the ball, he'd put the ball in his mouth. That's how babies interact with the world, through taste. In the second stage, around age 3 or so, hello, how are you? Good to see you. We call it the pre-operational stage. They're not yet operational, meaning they cannot yet live on their own or survive on their own. These kids are still pretty dumb. I showed you a video of a stupid kid in stage 2 who was having trouble with conservation. He couldn't figure out that the water being poured from one glass to the other was the same water. The Play-Doh being rolled up was the same Play-Doh. He was only in stage 2. He has some language abilities, but does not understand how the world works. In stage 3, the concrete stage, concrete, that's when you get the ability to understand how mass and matter works. Concrete objects you can manipulate and understand. So that's when they can kind of figure out the whole Play-Doh, graham cracker, coin thing, okay? In the 4th stage, the final stage, 4th stage, the formal stage, this is when you're like in middle school, high school, and you start to develop the ability to understand others' perspectives, empathy, think about the world, hypothetical situations, abstract morals and justice. That's the 4th stage. So all this is Piaget's theory. He's not the only cognitive psychologist. I mentioned up here Vygotsky. Vygotsky, I call him Vygotsky Guide Gotsky. He's the guy who came up with this idea of like getting outside of your comfort zone. He called it the next zone, the zone of proximal development. It was like the bullseye that I showed y'all. If you want to learn something, Vygotsky said, it's not just a natural automatic thing like Piaget made it seem like. You just go through the 4 stages. Vygotsky believed you needed a guide. You need someone to kind of be helping you out and showing you what comes next. And that's how you learn. It's 2 different approaches to cognitive development. Bandura's theory technically is also a theory of cognitive development. We keep talking about that. We talked about in Tuesday's video, and we talked about in yesterday's lesson, yesterday's video. But Bandura said we learn by watching others. So he's kind of like in between these 2 folks. Any questions about cognitive development, about Piaget, the Swiss developmental theorist? What day was this of your notes? Unit 6, day 2? All right, cool. We're kind of going in order. I like it. This is our last slide of standards. So moral development. What day do we talk about moral development? Those of you who are following along in your notebooks. Unit 6, day 3? 3 or 4? 4, okay. We did the famous Heinz dilemma, where I talked to y'all about Heinz and his wife was dying from cancer and should he save her or not? And we had this moral debate about what do you do? And based on your answers, we were able to say that you either were in the conventional, the normal stage, the pre-conventional stage, you're not very normal, not very moral, or the post-conventional stage, which is like you're super moral. You believe in, they were called universal ethical principles. This idea that like not only should you save your wife, but you should be willing to break the law to save anybody because human life is sacred. That's like the most moral answer according to Kohlberg, right? When I think about Kohlberg, coal, I think about Santa Claus, you get coal if you're bad. Kohlberg was measuring whether you're good or bad. That's the mnemonic that I use, okay? Now, we talked about Carol Gilligan, who thought that his theory was sexist because it made it seem like only old white male college professors were ethical because they can think a lot. So she developed what's called care theory, care ethics, where she said that no, morality is based on how much you sacrifice for others. How the word is altruistic. It's the idea that you sacrifice yourself for somebody else's good, altruism. She said that that's what determined people's morality. And she still used the terms pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional, but she said that she thought mothers were the most moral people because of how much they have to sacrifice of their body and their health and their well-being to raise their kids. It's an interesting idea. Questions about moral development? All right, number 7, Erikson's theory. This was the one I told you was my favorite. Erikson was the guy that I lived in his house for a little bit in Cambridge when I was at Harvard. He said that as you go through life, you have social interactions with other people, and that's how you develop 8 virtues. He said that there are 8 tensions or conflicts. Like the first one is trust versus mistrust. And it's about your relationship with your caregiver when you're early. And then later on, it's like, what was it? It was autonomy versus, does anyone have them written down? Autonomy versus shame and doubt. Can you do things on your own, or are you going to feel bad about yourself? Initiative, which is you contributing, versus guilt, inferiority, I think is somewhere in there too. For teenagers, we talked about y'all are looking for belonging. We called that a sense of help. Teenagers, adolescents, what are y'all looking for? Identity role formation versus what? Versus role confusion. So this idea that as teenagers, you're trying to figure out where you belong. We talk about how young adults are looking for intimacy. And it's like intimacy versus loneliness. And as an adult, you're trying to generate generativity. You're trying to be productive with kids and with your job and with money. And as an old person, you're trying to develop integrity, right? So Erikson said 8 stages, and they're all based on your social relationships and where you fit into society. Okay, that was his theory. Look back at that. You can always Google it as well. There's stuff on eClass. You can look at the old PowerPoints, the old notes to learn more about that. Standard 8 was about parenting styles. And I just wrote in parentheses here. Here are the 3 styles. Authoritative, she said, is the best. It's the right combination of high expectations, high standards, a little bit of strictness, bless you, which is what authoritarian parents have, but it also combines the care and support and love that a permissive parent shows, right? So permissive parents are too nice, they let you get away with things. Authoritarian parents are too strict, they're mean dictators, but authoritative has the balance of high expectations and also warmth. That's the best kind of parent that Baumrind said you could be. The last thing here, standard 9, was about being a teenager and the idea that like y'all feel like people are watching you, imaginary audience. You feel like no one understands what you're going through. He called this the personal fable. We talked about the formation of sexuality and how that's based on your biology for the most part. We talked about things that impact gender as you develop. We talked about Bandura's social learning theory. They did like we learn from society what terms like masculine and feminine mean, and that shapes our stereotypes and our norms. Okay, so developmental psych was all these different theories about from conception through death. We talked about the stages of grief and coping and denial and anger and how we can come through that and develop growth and resilience when we have tough times in life. All these things were part of Unit 6. Okay, so some quick names: Ainsworth, Strangeworth. She did what's called the strange situation, where she put kids in the room with a stranger and had the mom leave and the mom come back, and she watched to see how the baby respond, and that determined whether they had a secure or insecure attachment. That's Ainsworth's theory. Freud, we talked about his theory of how kids' personality actually comes from the stages they go through: oral, anal, phallic, latent, and genital. Owls always play late games. We talked about Harry Harlow. I say Harry Harlow hated happiness. He studied those poor little monkeys that he like isolated, took them away from their mom, and had them be raised by a wire mother and a cloth mother. And he found that the cloth mom is what really led to their well-being and development. We talked about Quack Quack Lorenz, Conrad Lorenz. He's the guy who raised the baby geese, the baby ducks, the baby goslings, and found that they latch on to the first person they see. So he was sort of the first person to say that there's an important time in a baby's life when they really have to develop a positive relationship with a caregiver, attachment theory, that Bowlby said as well. And this was supported by Ainsworth's research and supported by Erikson as well, that in the beginning of life, that's when you develop that strong relationship, the feeling of basic trust about the world. So here are the people you need to know. And this is what a chart looks like that you should be able to fill out. So I'm actually going to pause the recording. If you want to pause as well, I want y'all to take a little bit of time and try and answer these questions. See if you can do it without looking at your notes, but match up the words on the bottom with the proper stages at the top. Hopefully those of you who are watching this recording on a video, you paused, try to answer these. Here are the answers for you. Okay, so I went through and wrote and matched up all the different words in the bottom up top. This is on eClass, it'll be posted. And you may notice here that Erikson, technically he has 8 stages here. They didn't all fit in here. So remember, in adulthood, generativity is what they're trying to gain. And then as an old person, they're looking for integrity. So I just kind of wrote those in so you could have the rest of Erikson stages. But all three of Kohlberg stages are here, number 5, 6, and 7. Piaget's 4 stages are represented here by age 18. And Freud's 5 stages are represented here as well. Okay. So like you could be given an AP exam question that's just like, Tommy is 8 years old. Which of the following stages is Tommy in? And it might say, you know, post-conventional, it might say industry versus inferiority, it might say the oral stage, and it might say the sensory motor stage. And you just kind of got to figure out, thinking through what age Tommy is, which stage makes the most sense for him. Okay. So look over the chart, rewrite it, create it yourself so that you can study these things. In this PowerPoint and back in Unit 6, I also had this chart for you where it kind of has stuff filled out from Piaget, Freud, Erikson, and Kohlberg. This does not have the parenting styles on it. It does not have Vygotsky. It does not have Gilligan, but it's a pretty good summary of how you develop and how you change over time as you are growing up. Okay. I want y'all to do 6 practice questions. Those of you who missed this week, I've been going over practice questions from the College Board about these particular units. So this is kind of what your progress check questions might look like. Here's one. According to Kohlberg, children at the first level of moral reasoning, why do they make judgments about right and wrong? So in the lowest level of morality, the most basic level, the first level, what is the only thing that children care about? A, B, C, D, or E? 1, 2, 3. D is correct. They only care about rewards and punishment. Very good, Veronica. Thanks so much. They only care about rewards and punishments. The next stage would be them caring about like approval. The third stage would be them kind of thinking about how society has to work, what's expected of them. And then Kohlberg would say the most moral stage is when you have these strong ethical principles that guide your behavior. This is a weird question, so I included it. Gender typing is best described as, Mr. Jones, I don't think you talked about gender typing. Okay, maybe not gender typing, but what kind of typing have we talked about a lot this year? Types, stereotypes. Gender typing just means gender stereotypes are, and it's saying here, which of the following is the best example of gender stereotypes? The answer here is E. Gender stereotypes. Gender typing, it's like how society teaches us what we expect from males and females. A child believes that all birds can fly, yet realizes that a penguin is a bird. So is this kid being a dummy or are they being smart? Realizing that penguins are birds too. Is this them being dumb or is this them being smart? Are they getting it right or are they getting it wrong? They're getting it right. So which of these is when Piaget said they're getting it right? They're learning new categories. 1, 2, 3. Answer here's A. Accommodation is like being smart with new words, new categories. Maturation differs from learning in that developmental changes due to maturation. So this means physical growth. You know, sit, crawl, stand, walk. Those things, the answer here is A. Physical growth doesn't really depend on your environment. It just kind of happens automatically. Whereas learning is very much based on your environment. 2 more. Mom gives child an orange for the first time. The child rolls it across the table and says ball. Is this kid being smart or stupid? This kid's being stupid. So the answer here is going to be 1, 2, 3. D, assimilation. Stupid baby. The final one, Erikson, according to his theory, in early adulthood, so like in your 20s, what is the main concern? What is the conflict that you're trying to deal with? 1, 2, 3. It is D, intimacy. This is like careers like in your 30s. This is more about adolescence. This is like in your 30s and 40s. This is adolescence, but intimacy, he says, the main conflict of folks in their 20s and early adulthood. Okay. Let's look at an actual free response that the College Board gave just a couple years ago. I think we looked at part of this one in class. Abram graduated from high school and started at university. How might the following have affected his ability? The key thing from this free response is that you had to give an example. So you couldn't just define authoritarian parenting as being strict like a dictator. You had to give an example of what this might do to him, right? It might make him a really good student or a really bad student, but why? For number two, you couldn't just explain that this is one of Erikson's theory. You had to give an example of how Abram, I don't know, it has to be about him succeeding in college. So he's able to join the right clubs because he understands who he is. Number three here, if he experienced unconditional positive regard, which is a humanist Rogers idea, he will have good self-efficacy. He'll believe in himself because he's always been accepted and loved for who he truly is. These will help him be successful in college. Second part, his first year was very difficult. He did not do as well as he would like to have. How could he be more successful in the future? Well, we talked in Thursday's class about being creative, divergent thinking, being able to come up with lots of solutions to problems. So if he is more creative, that could help him be more successful. If he does deeper practice, deep semantic processing, that'll help him encode more information so he can get it out easily in the future. It'll help his long-term memory. That would help him be more successful in the future. Intrinsic motivation. If he's not doing things to get a reward or a prize or praise or money, but if he's just doing the things that he enjoys, he could be more successful in the future because intrinsic motivation is more powerful than external motivation. And then he wants to have a high self-efficacy. This we talked about yesterday is a belief that your actions matter. It's you believe in yourself. That's supposed to be an up arrow demonstrating how awesome Abram's going to be because he believes his actions can have a difference, can have an impact. I want y'all to grade this person's free response. Here's what they put for 1, 2, and 3. Which of these do you think they got correct? So he only got the first point there, but the College Board did said he gets all 4 points here. He gave a good example for divergent thinking, talking about being creative with solutions. Gave a good example for elaborative rehearsal, practicing multiple times with added detail, and talking about how that'll help the grades. Intrinsic motivation, they gave them the point here because it says succeeding for his own benefits, not for his parents. He's doing it for himself. And then the last point, self-efficacy is believing that you can do it. They connected to the placebo effect, which is interesting. When like you can kind of mentally convince yourself that something is going to work for you and that it's making a difference. So saying that he can handle situations. If he thinks he can do it, he actually can do it. That's the idea of self-efficacy here. So y'all's homework is to do the progress check number 6. There are some crash course videos you can watch if you want to get caught up on this stuff. If you want to go deeper, my videos are posted. You can get on my Quizlet. Only about 5 folks so far have retaken their Unit 1 test. All the old tests are open. With your free time, stay off the Instas and the Snaps. Do some review, y'all. It'll be good for you. Email me if you need anything, okay?